They spent around 10 minutes lying in bed together, engaged in conversation. Afterward, Tracy got out of bed and made her way to the bathroom. As she did so, I deactivated the security app, returned to bed, and feigned sleep. Approximately 5 minutes later, Tracy quietly returned to bed on her side. I kept my back turned to her to hide my tear-streaked face, although I remained awake for the entire night. Based on her breathing, she seemed to fall asleep quickly, likely owing to the satisfying encounter we'd had earlier. Larry leaned in and passionately kissed my wife on the lips, and she offered no resistance. I stood there in shock for a moment after their brief kiss. Tracy gestured to Larry with her finger, then stood up. I retreated to the bedroom and slipped back into bed, pretending to be asleep. Tracy opened the door, momentarily making me think the distressing events were over and she was returning to bed. Instead, she quietly entered the room, glanced at me to confirm I was asleep, and then left. As I rose and listened at our bedroom door, I overheard some whispered conversation before they both headed into the guest room where Larry was staying. In that moment, my heart shattered. I realized she was no longer mine. She belonged to him. 20 years of companionship, gone in an instant. I fought against the overwhelming urge to vomit then and there. I resisted the temptation to storm into the guest room and confront them, or to retaliate physically against both of them. Yes, it might have brought momentary satisfaction, but at that moment, it seemed inconsequential. The act itself, which I could have interrupted, wasn't the main issue. What mattered was her consent to it, her willingness to betray me, to discard my love, even if only temporarily, in order to commit adultery. She had agreed to breach my trust. Yes, I could have interrupted the act, at least momentarily, but I couldn't monitor her constantly, and if she could break my trust once, what would prevent her from doing it again? Yes, she might cry and beg for forgiveness, and perhaps even genuinely mean it now. But a trust once broken is easier to break a second time and beyond. As for Larry, I couldn't comprehend how he could betray me like this, someone who was like a brother to him. Perhaps that's why his first wife, Tiffany, divorced him 15 years ago, and why his second wife, Marguerite, also left him. How could I have been so blind not to see it coming? Instead of rushing into the guest room, I grabbed my phone and opened the home security app. I watched as the inevitable unfolded, the system documenting it all for posterity. It didn't take long for Larry to join my wife on the bed. Yes, I witnessed the entire ordeal, which lasted about 15 minutes. Tears streamed down my face as I attempted to comprehend how I had inadvertently contributed to the situation, beyond just being hospitable to an old friend. They lay in bed together for about 10 minutes, engrossed in conversation. Then Tracy arose from bed and proceeded to the bathroom. I deactivated the security app, returned to bed, and pretended to be asleep. Roughly 5 minutes later, she quietly resumed her place in bed beside me. I kept my back turned to conceal my tear-streaked face, remaining awake throughout the night. Tracy got up around 7 a.m., selected some clothing from her closet, and headed to the bathroom. Unaware of my wakefulness, I waited until I heard her depart the bathroom and move to the kitchen before rising, donning a robe, and joining her there. That's when I found her and Larry, both fully dressed, preparing to go somewhere. Clearly, last night's affair had emboldened them both. "Are we going somewhere?" I inquired innocently, despite not being dressed for an outing. Larry and I are just popping over to Starbucks for a latte. "We'll be back soon," Tracy swiftly responded before ushering Larry out the door. Truthfully, I was quite fine with them leaving because I had work to attend to and estimated I had about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours at most, assuming they'd make a pit stop for some intimate time. Hastily, I got dressed, hopped into my car, and drove to our bank, where I promptly closed our joint checking and savings accounts, opening a new checking account in my name only. I obtained a cashier's check for the savings account funds. Additionally, I closed the credit card linked to the bank account and opened a new one solely in my name. Having friends who had gone through divorces proved helpful. I knew precisely what steps to take. I also contacted my other credit card company and requested our limit be reduced to $1,000 above our current balance, just in case Tracy needed to make a purchase while out with Larry, say for a genuine cup of coffee. She might be annoyed, but not overly suspicious if one card had issues, as long as the other remained functional. I returned to the house after about an hour, and as I had expected, they hadn't returned yet. Finally, they came back about 2 hours later, both appearing a bit flushed and slightly out of breath, as if they had been on a long, brisk walk on a spring morning. Yeah, right. I continued with my pretense. What? You didn't bring anything back for me? I inquired. What was I thinking? Tracy responded, attempting to appear apologetic. Tracy and I took Larry to visit our city zoo and our local art museum, then treated him to dinner at one of the nicer restaurants in town. Throughout the entire day, they kept exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to throttle both of them or laugh at their attempts to deceive me. Once again, I rose at 11, intending to retire for the night. But unsurprisingly, Tracy showed no inclination to accompany me. I activated the app and commenced recording while lying in bed, attempting to maintain steady breaths. Approximately 30 minutes later, Tracy stealthily entered the room, approaching my side to ensure I was asleep before quietly departing. Once satisfied with my facade, after her departure, I donned some shorts and patiently waited in the darkness until I heard their activities begin. Subsequently, I stealthily made my way to the kitchen and located her purse. Evidently, Tracy and Larry hadn't exhausted all their time engaging in intimacy earlier in the day, as she must have utilized a debit card machine to make a purchase online, securing an airline ticket. I extracted 5 pristine $100 bills from the bank envelope, meticulously replacing them with strips of nose pepper to maintain the appearance of fullness, and then restored both the envelope and the etiquette to her purse. The contempt woman, I said to myself. Upon returning to bed, realizing not only was she unfaithful, but she was also planning to abscond with him after just 2 days. After 20 years, I must truly be inept at this whole husband thing. Tracy and Larry took an awfully long time this time around. It seemed like they might have done it twice, with a short break in between. I didn't bother watching this time. I didn't need to, though I did record it. She slipped into bed quietly around 2 a.m., snuggled up to me briefly, and fell asleep within 5 minutes. Once again, I spent the entire night awake. Around 8 a.m., I heard Larry in the bathroom. After he finished, I heard him briefly stop in the kitchen, then heard him leave the house. I assumed he was going to wait in his rental car. Tracy got up shortly after he left, gathered some clothes, quietly grabbed a suitcase from the closet, and headed into the bathroom. That was my signal to put on my shorts and wait by the front door. Tracy looked lightly made up and dressed casually in jeans and a top when she emerged from the bathroom, and the way she carried the suitcase indicated it was already packed. She didn't notice me sitting in the living room chair about 10 feet away from the door and was about to grab the handle when I spoke up, calmly but firmly. After 20 years, I don't even deserve a simple goodbye. Not even a screw you, jerk. Nothing. At least I caught her off guard, and she literally jumped back from the door. Bobby, obviously maintaining my composure required every ounce of willpower I possessed. I held the advantage in this situation, and I intended to fully exploit it. Really, Tracy? After 20 years, is this how it all ends? I do love you, Bob, truly, but I don't think you'd understand, she stuttered. How considerate of you, Tracy, I responded calmly. She attempted to speak, faltered, tried again, stumbled over her words, and ended up sounding like Porky Pig. That's enough. It's time for you to leave. Lover boy must be getting anxious by now, I stated. Tracy appeared shocked, clearly not anticipating this turn of events. Aren't you going to ask me to stay? She muttered. Nope, it's quite clear you don't love me, so why would I want you to stay? Maybe you'll get hit by a bus in LA if I'm lucky, she stuttered once more. I gestured towards the door, and she departed. I listened as Larry's rented car pulled away from the driveway. I was feeling satisfied with the confusion I had caused in Tracy's mind and the dent I had made in her wallet. Not an ounce of guilt weighed on me. Screw her. 20 minutes later, I headed to the hardware store to purchase 3 new door lock sets and a new remote for the garage door. After installing everything and ensuring it worked, I settled into my lazy boy to make the most difficult phone call of my life, informing our 18-year-old daughter that her mother had cheated on me and left. Lila is a lovely child, a spitting image of her mother. She came into our lives 2 years after Tracy and I got married. We attempted to expand our family after her arrival, but for reasons unknown, it didn't happen. So when we reached our 10-year anniversary, Tracy opted for tubal ligation. That decision meant no more condoms for me or birth control pills for her, and we were both content with that, or so I thought. Until Friday came. When I called Lila on Sunday morning shortly before 9, she felt that something was wrong. She asked, and I confirmed it. "Pumpkin, your mom left me. Not so long ago. She spent 2 days with my former college roommate and then left with him about an hour ago. I felt it was important that you hear it from me first." "What?" she exclaimed. "Did you let mom be with your college roommate and then let her leave with him?" "No, that's not what I meant. I didn't allow her to have a relationship with Larry. She made that choice herself after I went to bed. But I caught them," I replied. "So you ran into them?" she shouted back at me. At that moment, I spoke slowly and carefully. "Lila, no, baby. When I found out what happened, I left them alone. The fact that your mother was prone to this meant that I had already lost her. At that moment, none of them understood what I knew. Their decision to leave was entirely their own. However, I talked to your mother before she left. Dumpkin, I don't want to drag you into this. I want you to continue loving your mom. You don't have to approve of her actions as long as you and I are fine." "Well, I think she's acting like a woman of easy virtue, Dad, and you don't have to put up with it. Have you ever been tempted to quarrel with your friend? Everyone will face the consequences, baby, in their own time." After ending my call with Lila, I reached out to Tracy's parents. Until that point, we had always had a good relationship, but I anticipated that it would soon change. Nonetheless, I wanted them to hear my side of the story, as Tracy's version could differ significantly. As expected, Tracy's parents didn't react well to the news. After all, she's their daughter. However, when they began to insult me, I took a strategic approach. I sent them an email with a screenshot from the first night out, showing their daughter in a compromising position. With no response from them, I concluded that the conversation and our relationship were over. On Monday, I contacted a lawyer recommended by a friend who had gone through a divorce. It turned out that this lawyer had been thoroughly outmatched by his ex-wife's lawyer, and that's who he suggested I consult when I called for advice on Sunday. Thankfully, with the support of my boss, I managed to meet with Jana Wilhelm that Thursday. My initial impression of her was that she was someone you wouldn't want to go up against. Living in a state where fault is considered in divorce proceedings, I was able to demand a lot when I filed for divorce citing infidelity, and my attorney was more than capable of handling the challenge. Ultimately, I ended up with the house and 75% of our joint assets. Tracy attempted to argue that she wasn't earning as much as she did during our marriage, but Mrs. Wilhelm effectively argued to the court that Tracy voluntarily left her job to move to California, and therefore shouldn't expect me to financially compensate her for that decision. Despite Tracy's resistance to the divorce, it only took me 6 months to attain freedom. Then began the true challenge, grappling with lingering uncertainties about my adequacy as a husband. I had believed Tracy and I had a strong marriage, yet it crumbled in just 2 days. During the divorce proceedings, my social life dwindled. I mostly remained at home, and when I did go out, I had no interest in female company. Even after the divorce was finalized, I lacked the inclination to seek companionship. Undoubtedly, I was shattered, a fact I acknowledged as I sought the help of a therapist. Coincidentally, she happened to be tending bar at Chuck's, a cozy establishment known for its hard rock music, premium drinks, and a clientele eager to engage with newcomers. Adele had a knack for effortlessly mixing whiskey and ice, keeping the bar lively, and managing rowdy patrons with ease. She believed everyone had a story, making it her mission to listen to them all. Despite my usual preference for sitting alone at a back table during my visits, Adele decided it was my turn to share. Summoned by one of her servers, I hesitated but was informed it wasn't a request, it was a command. Reluctantly, I made my way to the far end of the bar, dubbed Adele's office. As I sipped my Crown Royal Black, Adele approached, introducing herself. Despite her already familiar presence, she astutely noticed the ring mark on my finger, inquiring about my divorce and years of marriage. Impressed by her perceptiveness, I found myself divulging the details of my failed marriage and subsequent life, all for the price of a $10 drink rather than the usual $100 per hour therapy session. Adele, roughly my age, possessed the broad shoulders reminiscent of a former swimmer and the muscular arms of a female weightlifter. Her hair, a blend of two-tone brown and blonde, typically cascaded down her shoulders, and she opted for minimal makeup, if any. She exuded a tomboyish vibe akin to that of a protective older sister, packaged in a frame standing about 5 feet tall and weighing 120 pounds. Direct and candid, she didn't shy away from speaking her mind, and she didn't hesitate to point out that my solid demeanor at the back of the bar wasn't doing me any favors. Taking her advice, I relocated to the front of the bar and engaged in lively banter. Whether by chance or not, my mood noticeably improved, and suddenly life offered more than just the routine of work, which had consumed much of the past year. I even ventured out on a few dates, devoid of physical intimacy, reminiscent of high school courting. Upon returning from a Saturday night date around 10, my mood plummeted when I noticed a beat-up Chevy parked smack dab in the middle of my driveway. Furious, I pulled over to the curb and hopped out of my car, ready to confront whoever dared to block my entrance. As I stormed towards the car, Tracy emerged from the driver's side, giving me a coy smile that used to melt my heart. "Damn, hey Bob," she greeted cheerfully. I was far from cheerful about this unexpected encounter. I had hoped to never lay eyes on her again. Despite my feelings, I couldn't help but notice that she looked pretty good in her snug jeans and form-fitting sweater. However, even with a quick glance, it was evident she had lost some of her toned physique and gained a few wrinkles. Perhaps life in California with Larry wasn't as glamorous as she had made it out to be. Once I realized she wasn't merely an intruder in my driveway, my approach towards her slowed. However, I stopped a few feet away from her, unwilling to offer any form of affection, not even a brief embrace or a kiss on the cheek. I lacked that level of civility or forgiveness. "Not even a hug after 20 years?" Tracy inquired, extending her arms towards me. I regarded her with skepticism, maintaining my distance as I pondered her intentions. "I won't bite, Bob. I simply wanted to talk and catch up," she said. "I admit I was rather rude when I left last year. Should we continue this conversation indoors, or would you prefer to remain out here in the driveway for the neighbors to gossip?" "It seems you've changed the lock since last year," she remarked. I welcomed her inside and guided her to the kitchen. We took seats at the table, positioned in chairs opposite each other. "You could at least offer a girl a drink, you know? Have your manners vanished along with me?" she remarked. "I don't keep any whiskey around anymore. There's no one here to drink it, but I know you've got Tennessee honey. I'll take a shot of that," she said. It was a surprise. Tracy never used to drink hard liquor when we were together. I poured us both shots and passed one to her. She accepted it with her left hand, and I noticed she still wore her wedding rings. "A nice touch," I commented. "I see yours is gone. So where is the jerk lurking?" I inquired. "Probably back in California," she said. "We split up about a month ago. Besides that big ego of his, he really didn't offer me anything I wanted or needed. I shouldn't have, but I couldn't resist. It had been eating away at me for a year, and I needed an answer. So, you left me after 20 years because Larry has a 9-inch pole?" I asked incredulously. Tracy's expression twisted strangely, and beads of sweat stood out on her forehead. I had a feeling that her forthcoming answer would finally reveal the truth. "Yes, more or less," she murmured almost inaudibly. I exclaimed, causing her to recoil from the table. "Are you serious about this? How could you give up 20 years of marriage to some guy just because he has a good instrument?" "I can't explain it," she began. "I was amazed when I saw it, and I wanted to try it. I've never seen such tools in my life." "Shut up," I interrupted. "I have proof on video, and if it was love, then you are really promiscuous. Well then, call it what you want." But for the first couple of months, I felt an irresistible desire to possess him. As for my personal life, I had difficulty finding a job after I suddenly quit my job here, which was detrimental to me. In addition, he had financial difficulties due to child support payments, so it was like a daily struggle. Eventually, he was fired for misuse of his company's credit card. It turned out that someone had alerted the company's internal audit department that he had used the card to buy my plane ticket, and he blamed me for it. However, upon further investigation, it turned out that he had been abusing the card for personal expenses for some time. As a result, we decided to break up, and I decided to return home in the hope of reconciling with my former employer and perhaps rekindling the feelings that you may still have for me. I couldn't help but smile inwardly when she mentioned Larry possibly getting fired for using his company credit card to buy her plane ticket. When I saw the e-ticket, I realized that Tracy's card wouldn't have covered both the cash and the ticket. I figured Larry didn't have the money, so he likely just used his company card and hoped to conceal it. The audit department was very grateful for my tip-off. "I'll give you top marks for audacity," I retorted. "You didn't care about my feelings when you left. If I hadn't accidentally stumbled upon the truth, you would have walked away with both my heart and my dignity, and you couldn't care less. Thank goodness I found out." "So, you only took my heart, and I got to keep my dignity," I said. "So, no, there's no more space in my heart for you. I'll always have some lingering affection for you. I can't seem to shake off that stain. But you need to stay away from me as far as possible. Who knows, maybe our daughter might still have a little room in her heart for you." "Well, I had to give it a shot," she said as she stood up slowly. She removed both of her rings and held them out to me. I shook my head slowly. "Keep them. Maybe they'll come in handy for a down payment on a new car when this one gives out," I said. "I'm truly sorry I hurt you, Bob," she said. "No, Tracy, you're truly sorry that I'm not a pushover and you screwed up something really good. Maybe someday down the line you'll be a little sorry for hurting me," I said. And for the second time, Tracy walked out of my life. Meeting Tracy again turned my life upside down. I've been in a gloomy mood at work all week. Fortunately, when I went to Chuck's on Friday night in search of food, strong drinks, and a dose of common sense, Adele was working at the bar. She felt that something was wrong just by looking into my eyes. "Did she come?" she asked. I nodded. Was I really so terrible that she dumped me after just 2 days? I whispered to Adele. She claimed that it was all because of his 9-inch instrument and because of the incredible sensation she felt when doing it. She felt so amazing that she was ready to give up a lasting 20-year marriage. Is it really that simple? And then, a year later, when the novelty of his instrument began to fade, she wanted to come back to my house, hoping that I was trusting and flighty enough to take her back. Even if I was stupid enough to think about it, how soon would she find someone with a 10-inch tool? I asked. Adele grabbed the entire bottle of Crown Black, took my hand, and led me to a table next to the bar. She refilled my glass and poured herself one too. "Bob, have you ever heard the term instrument freak?" she asked. "I've heard it a few times," so I nodded. "I think it's a real phenomenon, Bob. According to my observations, this does not happen often, but when it does, a woman seems to lose all rationality and can only act according to her impulses, in much the same way that men sometimes allow their desires to dictate their actions. But it happens much less often in women than in men. But when it does happen, the game is almost over for her. The unspoken truth that exists between the sexes is that most men are able to share a bed and emotions, while most women find it difficult. Many men can enter into purely physical contacts, leave, and not think about it. But for us women, it's often not that easy. When a man gives us pleasure, at that moment, we may have feelings for him, perhaps even lasting ones. And if we believe that we can continue to experience this pleasure, we can fall in love with him, even if we already have another partner in mind. That's when things get really complicated. I suppose that's exactly what happened to your Tracy. This may be an isolated incident, or it may happen every time she gets in touch with someone new. It's not about you, Bob, as they say. It's not about you. It's about me. It couldn't be more appropriate in this situation, Bob. But she still had the choice to say no the first time, and that could have been the end of it, I said. You're right about that, Bob. With these words, Adele and I got up from our seats, took glasses and a bottle, and returned to the bar. It's time to move on with life, I said. 2 weeks later, at work, I received a voicemail from someone named Leavon Brown from the bank where Tracy used to work and was attempting to reconnect. Great, I thought. Does she expect me to provide her with a positive character reference? Not likely. However, having been raised with manners, that I felt obligated to return the call. So, I did, preparing myself for what I anticipated. "Mr. Kingsland, You may not know me, but I'm familiar with you, at least by reputation, through your ex-wife. While this may be forward, I was wondering if we could meet up for a drink sometime. Mr. Kingsland? Mr. Kingsland? I snapped back to reality from the alternate universe I had drifted into, took a deep breath, and responded, Miss Brown, I'm not sure what game you're playing, but if it's got anything to do with my ex-wife, count me out, Mr. Kingsland. Bob, this has absolutely nothing to do with your ex-wife, though her decision to divorce you is why I'm reaching out. Over the 10 years we worked together, she always praised you as an incredible husband, father, and lover. Now that you're single, I'm curious to see if she was right. I've been divorced for about 5 years myself, and it feels like all the good ones are taken. When I saw your ex at the building earlier this week trying to get a job here, it occurred to me that you might be available. All right, I'll take your word for it. So why don't we meet for drinks at Chuck's on Friday night? I preferred the meeting to be on my familiar ground just in case she was a pawn from Tracy or if things didn't pan out. If she was indeed a pawn from Tracy, then I sincerely pitied her because I knew Adele would handle her mercilessly and in more ways than one. I wrapped up work promptly at 5 on Friday and made my way to Chuck's to update Adele on the evening's plans. As expected, she assured me of her support. I took a seat towards the rear of the room, keeping a vigilant watch on the entrance. Just as the clock struck 6, a tall, attractive brunette in a classic little black dress entered, made her way to the bar, and inquired with Adele about my presence. Adele gestured towards my table, and Leah Von Brown made her approach on 3-inch heels. As she approached, but I noticed Adele in the background giving me a thumbs up. As she neared my table, I stood up out of habit, and she extended her hand for a firm handshake. I estimated her to be around 45 years old, 5 feet tall, weighing 125 pounds, with long hair, an average-sized bust, and a slender waist. She possessed a certain prettiness, though not strikingly beautiful, and her blue eyes sparkled, despite the dim lighting of the bar. And at least she was pleasant to look at. About 30 minutes into our conversation, she shared her experience of divorcing her husband of 18 years due to his LAX interpretation of marital fidelity. In turn, I disclosed my own situation with Tracy, explaining that while she hadn't divorced me, I had initiated the divorce because I upheld my vows. She seemed genuinely impressed by my stance. An hour later, I ordered dinner, and Leah Vaughn and I indulged in everything from appetizers to dessert. She admitted she had never been to Chuck's before, but declared it would now become a regular spot for her. I assured her I'd be more than happy to accompany her here anytime she wished. We refrained from intimacy on our initial date, a decision I believe was wise for both of us. However, as the evening drew to a close, I escorted her to her car and initiated a gentle kiss on her irresistibly soft lips. She met my advance without hesitation, perhaps even welcoming it. We promptly scheduled another rendezvous for the following Friday at Chuck's, and as she drove off into the night, I returned inside feeling triumphant. Seems like things went smoothly, remarked Adele as I approached the bar for a nightcap. Drinks are on me. No, big sis, this one's on me, I replied. The anticipation for the next Friday was palpable. Work, which had become my refuge during tough times, now felt like a thrilling new chapter. Even my boss noticed my renewed vigor, especially after I finally cracked a long-standing engineering problem, promising significant savings for our project. For the second consecutive week, Leah Von Brown arrived at Chuck's right on schedule. She donned a stunning low-cut red dress that accentuated her figure, prompting me to request a twirl. Though her cheeks matched the color of her dress, she obliged with a bashful smile. We had an amazing dinner and a wonderful time together. I invited her back to my place afterward, where we spent some time cuddling on the couch like teenagers. Despite how amazing she looked, I felt it wasn't the right moment for any further intimacy. So, we had a brief discussion about how to spend the rest of the night. Since she followed me to my place, she had to leave first. As I opened the front door for her, she gave me a mischievous grin and kissed me passionately. I was impressed by how she ended the evening. I promised to call her to avoid seeming too eager. I waited 3 days before asking her out again. This time, I suggested dinner and dancing at a different venue than Chuck's, and I decided to pick her up for the date. We've scheduled our next date for 2 weeks from last Friday. Although I started dating shortly before Leavon contacted me, it's been about a year since I last had contact with a woman, and I haven't been close to anyone other than Tracy for about 22 years. I have to admit I'm nervous, like a 16-year-old on a first date. I understand that it's like riding a bike, which you will never forget, but every woman is unique. She has her own preferences and desires. I was hoping that I would still be able to navigate the place easily 22 years later. Tracy was a famous person, but it was uncharted territory. Damn it, Bob. Stop thinking too much, I scolded myself. Leavon met me at the door in a spring floral dress with a cint on the front, with a plunging neckline and a length of about mid-thigh. She wore it flawlessly. I couldn't believe what I saw, my jaw dropping in disbelief. Bob, that wasn't cool. Definitely not cool. The dining experience turned out to be quite pleasant, largely because of the delightful company of my partner. Despite my lack of prowess in dancing, the post-dance session went smoothly, all thanks to Leon's skillful leadership. However, I couldn't shake off the creeping feeling of paranoia as I noticed other men stealing glances at her. This feeling stemmed from my past trauma of losing my wife of 2 decades within just 2 days. At one instance, Leavon excused herself to the restroom, and my attention was drawn to 2 men approaching her as she made her way across the floor. Anxiety surged within me, but I managed to maintain composure at our table, reminding myself that not all women were like Tracy, who had left me abruptly. Or were they? When Leavon returned, I acknowledged the attention she had garnered and commended her adept handling of it. She, in turn, noticed the lingering impact of my past relationship on me. For 20 years, my marriage had provided me with confidence and security, but now I felt adrift. I won't follow Tracy's path, she reassured me, locking eyes. Though I may not know all the details, I vow not to abandon you. I can't promise eternity, but if things falter, I won't disappear with someone else. Her words lifted a weight off my shoulders, evident in the sigh of relief that escaped me. The rest of the evening unfolded beautifully, and as I escorted her home, she extended an invitation inside. What followed was a night filled with intimacy, whispered words of affection filling the air as she drifted off to sleep in my embrace. Little did I know then that Leavon had marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Although marriage wasn't in our cards, we cherished 15 years together, savoring each moment. Katie and Rita also hold special places in my heart, but their stories will have to wait for another time. And with that, our tale comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated on more captivating stories. Best regards.